The Case for Israel by Alan Dershowitz is the Bible for those interested in understanding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In his book, Dershowitz takes on a number of false accusations made against the State of Israel over the past few decades. We'll look at some of those now. Accusation number 1. Israel created the Arab refugee problem. This is a lie. The reality is that the problem was created by a war initiated by the Arabs. In November of 1947, the UN voted to create two states. The Jews accepted it, but the Arabs rejected it and went to war. Israel was set upon by its neighbors. Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria all joined in a conflict against the fledgling state of Israel, seeking its destruction. Israel ended up winning the war, but in the process, several 100,000 Arabs fled their homes. Most Arabs fled because they had been told to by their Arab leaders, not by Israelis. Accusation number 2. The Israeli occupation is the cause of all the problems. Another lie. The reality is that Israel has, on multiple occasions, offered to end the occupation in exchange for best efforts by Palestinian authorities to end the terrorism. Israel has offered the Palestinians a homeland on multiple occasions, and each time the Palestinians have rejected the offer and resorted instead to increased terrorism. It's remarkable that the Palestinians have been offered anything after the Second World War, considering the fact that their leadership actively sided with the losing Nazis. There has been no geopolitical conflict in history where a state has rejected multiple offers of statehood, responded with the massacring of civilians, and then been rewarded for its rejectionism and crimes against humanity by still another offer of statehood. Accusation number 3. Israeli settlements in the West Bank are the major barrier to peace. This too is another lie. The reality is that the Arabs and the Palestinians refused to make peace before there was even a single settlement. In fact, between 1949 and 1967, there were no Israeli settlements, and there were numerous terrorist attacks against Israel. In other words, there were terrorist attacks against Israel when there were no settlements, and there were terrorist attacks against Israel when there were settlements. If Israel were to pull out of every settlement in the West Bank without any agreement for peace, it's unlikely that anything would change. In fact, Israelis might be worse off. In 2005, when Israel abandoned the Gaza Strip, leaving numerous lands, houses, and structures to the Palestinians of Gaza, they were rewarded for their generosity with thousands of rockets fired into Israeli cities. Accusation number 4. Israel is the prime human rights violator in the world. This too is another lie. The reality is that Israel is the only nation in the Mideast that operates under the rule of law, and its record on human rights is better than that of any country that has faced similar challenges. Its Supreme Court is among the best in the world, and has repeatedly overturned the army and the government and made them to operate under the rule of law. Additionally, Israel has one of the best records in the world with regards to the rights of women, gays, and the physically and mentally challenged. It also has freedom of speech, press, dissent, and religion. Accusation number 5. Israel is the cause of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Another lie. The repeated rejection of a two-state solution by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the Arab world, the Palestinian people, and Arab leaders, including Haj Amin al-Husseini and Yasser Arafat, lies at the heart of the conflict. The reason for the rejection has been that most Arab and Muslim leaders have cared more about denying the Jews the right of self-determination in those areas of Palestine in which they were a majority than in exercising their own right of self-determination in those areas with a Muslim majority. The Middle East problem isn't difficult to understand. Until Palestinian leaders and Arab leaders acknowledge that Israel has the right to be free from terrorism, military attack, rockets, and suicide bombings, there will be no peace. Like this video, help us right now in YouTube search engine rankings by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Or go to truthseekvids.com for more great videos.